Today we're going to start a discussion on unemployment, but before we do, it's also Mike's birthday, so I want to wish Mike a happy birthday, and to all our listeners, wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
So let's get started with unemployment. We're going to take a deep dive on unemployment over the next few weeks, and today we're going to start sort of at the state level. So let's start with the unemployment numbers as they are progressing here today. So take us through where we are today.
So we start off and just look at some stats about the labor force. So currently start with the total number of people employed. So looking at the bright side of it, about 129 million people employed in the U.S. So that's about a 79% employment rate we estimate now. So basically, if you looked at the total number of people unemployed prior to the emergency declaration in mid-March, you already had about 7 million people unemployed coming into this crisis. And since then, we have had record week after record week of initial jobless claims. So over the past 5 weeks in total, we've received an additional 26.5 million initial jobless claims. So that brings the total number of unemployed people in the United States somewhere around 33.6 million, an unemployment rate of 20.6%. We estimate is the true number. So those are all records. That's unemployment rate is almost double the prior high from the early 80s. And if you think back to the global financial crisis, our peak jobless claims figure in terms of a weekly jobless claim number was somewhere around 650,000 for a week. And now our peak is 6.9 million. So just absolutely unprecedented.
And the whisper number for this week is another 3.3 or so million. Is that correct?
That's right around 3.5 million expected this week. And then on May 8th, we get the BLS report, the big non-farm payrolls report, and that's estimated to show about 19 million job losses. It's important to note that the BLS report is very lagging, and it's trying to catch up with the weekly jobless claims, which is a Department of Labor statistic that's coming out on a weekly basis.
Right. And we'll take a much deeper dive into that particular data point when it's released. But just looking at the graph, I mean, this is beyond off the chart. To see this type of rise over this history is just, it's shocking to see these numbers. So let's start at the state level and let's take a look at the states because they're all impacted differently. And I think it's important to get perspective on how each state is positioned for this. So take us through this picture or illustration.
Yeah, this heat map, the unemployment rate in every state has gone up considerably, some obviously worse than others. But you can see, and this is just looking at the change in unemployment since mid-March. Some of the states worst hit, Kentucky, an increase in unemployment of 24% in a little over a month's time. You look at New York, an increase of 15%, Illinois 12%, Florida 11%. So just a very sharp increase in unemployment across the nation, and it's putting a lot of pressure on politicians to make sure that this idea is the cure worse than the disease. The employment crisis is creating this tug and pull against the health crisis constantly. And a lot of states that are the worst hit, you look at Georgia, 21% increase in unemployment. There's no doubt that that's a big reason why the governor of Georgia is pushing for one of the quickest reopenings of the economy, because have to start getting people back to work. And the hope is that a lot of these are furloughed employees. But if this persists for longer than people expect, those furloughs can just turn into straight layoffs. So there's definitely a lot of pressure to get the economy back open. And you start to calculate the cost of this. And we estimate if you take the total number of citizens collecting unemployment claim checks, and multiply that by a median income per state, what you're looking at is a weekly cost of 27 to 39 billion in lost wages. So that's a pretty big dollar amount. And it's starting to put some pressure on states from a budget perspective, which is something we have in the next chart.
And that's each week those numbers are correct.
Exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are weekly. So
Right. And then the states that have the ability to pay this unemployment, the next chart illustrates that that's not looking too optimistic right now.
right. And so what we're showing here is the estimated number of weeks that each state can continue to pay the current level of outstanding unemployment claims in their trust fund. And you can see a lot of them are running very short. California is estimated to run out in about 2 weeks, Illinois 5 weeks. It's important to note that this doesn't mean that unemployment claims are just going to stop being paid once these trust funds are exhausted. What it does mean is that all of these states are going to have to borrow from the federal government in order to continue to pay claims. And so then you think the longer term implication of this for a lot of these states that already had very shaky finances, this is only going to add to that. You think during the global financial crisis, there were a few states that had to borrow from the federal government to pay claims. This time around, it's the majority of states, except for Wyoming. It looks like they're going to be okay. But most likely, the majority of states are going to have to borrow from the federal government in order to continue to pay claims.
So there has been a massive push in each of these states in a quest to get their unemployment benefits started, and we haven't seen that the states have been able to satisfy this demand. So maybe walk us through what the states are doing and how many people actually haven't even received their unemployment benefits yet.
Right. A lot of states have just been overwhelmed, and understandably so. You think about the staffing situation, they're dealing with the COVID-19 crisis as well, and they're dealing with an unprecedented surge of basically their workload of unemployment claims. So there has been a lot of delay in getting the checks to folks that recently lost their job and filed for unemployment. The initial fiscal stimulus, it reduce the number of days until you can actually start collecting unemployment. So it sped up the timeline even more, and it was sort of a perfect storm to the point where it's estimated now that those folks that filed for unemployment during March, sort of the initial wave, maybe only a third of them by mid-April were receiving checks. So that speaks to how overwhelmed the unemployment insurance claims offices have been. And then also speaks to the importance of the stimulus checks that went out, and likely that, the government is going to have to do another round of stimulus checks because it's putting a lot of folks that just lost their jobs in very difficult positions, struggling to pay their bills.
Right. They'll have to do at least one more round. And there's also the unintended consequence of some of these people who are getting unemployment with the new provisions will actually probably be making more money being unemployed than they will going back to work. Is that not the case?
Yeah, that's the case as well. You look at all of this, and you have to take a step back, and you think, once this crisis is over and it's behind us, and you'll start to look at, what were the motivations? It looks like some folks were probably better off filing for unemployment. Maybe the fiscal stimulus, how it was structured, incentivized companies to lay off employees. So all of that will need to be looked at, because with the amount of money that's gone into the Paycheck Protection Program, these number of jobless claims, they should be slowing down by now, and that's clearly not the case.
Right, and we've actually seen some situations where employees are begging the employers to let them go into unemployment so they can actually make more money in unemployment. But we will do a much deeper dive into the unemployment figures when they come out on May 8th. And thanks for joining us today, Mike. Enjoy your birthday, and we'll talk to everyone later.
Thank you.